And so both of these players in the finals are rocking the restricted duo of Groudon Xerneas. It's something we've been seeing for all season long. It's proven to be capable. So I wonder how each player is going to try to put their own Groudon and Xerneas in the upper hand. John has Golduck to threaten Groudon, but they both also have Bronzong to threaten each other's Xerneas.
Yeah, so John's team consists of Xerneas, Smeargle, Groudon, Golduck, Bronzong, and Kangaskhan. And he's facing a Xerneas, Smeargle, Bronzong, and Groudon. The differences here being the Salamence and Cresselia. It is interesting seeing seeing Cresselia and Bronzong on the same team. They tend to fill very similar roles. But I guess are a little bit matchup dependent. So
yeah,
what are you thinking? Since these two teams are so similar, what are going to be the key differences that you can use to lead to victory?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how speed control plays a factor. Both players have a Bronzong, and Tom also has a Cresselia, so there's a lot of trick room mode here. But Tom has a Salamence, something that John lacks. So Tom, we know from the top 4 match, has Tailwind on his Salamence, and so if he were to bring Salamence, he could potentially set up a Tailwind and give himself a speed advantage, especially if John doesn't have his own Bronzong to set Trick Room.
Right, and so that's something that's going to be different. Setting a Tailwind could be an advantage, but if John happens to bring the Trick Room mode of his team, could also be a huge detriment. So that's something that Tom's definitely got to keep in mind when he's picking his mons and making his game plan for the game.
And so Tom does in fact lead with the Salamence as well as the Smeargle, meanwhile John leading with his Groudon and his Kangaskhan. So Salamence could, like I mentioned, potentially set up a Tailwind this turn. However, Kangaskhan could flinch either of Tom's Pokemon with a Fake Out.
Right, so John's got the Fake Out pressure and just, the potential for Groudon to deal a massive amount of damage. But at the same time, both of these mons have been intimidated. Groudon probably tending towards the physical attacks, so they're both going to be a little bit weakened.
Right, and we know if Smeargle manages to shoot off a Dark Void, the Pokemon are going to be going to sleep. That's depending on whether Kangaskhan decides to fake out the Salamence or the Smeargle, or if Groudon and Kangaskhan just both attack into the Smeargle and just break through that Focus Sash.
Yeah, so John decides to go ahead and switch out his Groudon. Doesn't feel like it's going to be able to do enough damage to that Salamence, I imagine.
Right, and he just brings in the Quack Attack, which John revealed on stream just a moment ago has Ice Beam, which is going to be able to do big damage to the Salamence. That's if it doesn't go to sleep. I would think because of the switch that John would be going for a Fake Out this turn into the Smeargle, or else he's just putting himself at risk of getting put to sleep by a Dark Void.
Yeah, so the Smeargle does Spiky Shield there. Now let's see who... Oh, and Kangaskhan fires off that Fake Out into Smeargle while Salamence sets up a Tailwind. So that's a really, really good turn for Tom, because now his Smeargle is going to be faster than both of these Pokemon, and it gets an accuracy boost, which means there's basically no reason not to fire off a Dark Void this turn. And how is John going to play out of that?
Kangaskhan could potentially go for a Sucker Punch, get off a little bit of damage before it gets put to sleep. Or another play he could make would be to just let himself get put to sleep, take his sleep turns, and maybe just hope to wake up as quickly as possible on the next turn. Which I think is what he decides to do here. No Protects coming out, no Sucker Punch coming out, just both of his Pokemon are getting put to sleep by this Dark Void.
Yeah, so now he's really playing, and I hope I don't get bad sleep rolls. Just a really bad turn 1 for John, and just an excellent turn 1 for Tom. So both Pokemon have taken a sleep turn.
The Moody Rolls on the Smeargle have also been very good for Tom. He's gotten an evasion boost and an accuracy boost. So even if John manages to wake up this turn, there's a chance he won't be able to knock out the Smeargle because of evasion, and Tom doesn't have to worry about missing any more Dark Voids because of that accuracy boost.
Yeah, for sure. And so Salamence goes for another Hyper Voice, which is not enough to KO either of these Pokemon. Depending on what the Smeargle does, if it has any way to deal damage, just going for a Dark Void, looking for those switches. Kangaskhan takes another turn of sleep. However, the Golduck does wake up and does get to fire off an Ice Beam into the Salamence slot. Is it going to be enough to KO? It's not quite. Another
It appears that Golduck, because John trained it to be so slow and defensive, that even though Ice Beam is 4 times super effective against the Salamence, it's just not quite enough to knock it out.
Yeah, and so that's really unfortunate because it's going to let Salamence fire off another Hyper Voice, but Kangaskhan goes for the Sucker Punch and is going to be able to KO the Salamence first. But we're probably going to see another Dark Void come out and put these two Pokemon right back to sleep.
Right, so John was able to play in such a way to knock out the Salamence before either of his Pokemon get knocked out, but the cost of making that is now whatever Tom brings in the Salamence slot is going to be facing 2 Pokemon that have already been put to sleep.
Right, and who are both in really low range and easy knockout range.
Right, we know that Tom has a Groudon and a Xerneas. Both of those Pokemon very commonly carry spread moves, Xerneas with Dazzling Gleam and Groudon with Precipice Blades. So if Tom Xerneas were to go for a Dazzling Gleam here, it would be able to pick up a double knockout, and then he would be up 3-2.
Yeah, and Tailwind just ran out, but we saw the Smeargle get a speed boost, so it's still going to be faster than everything on the field. However, Tom decides he's just going to take it out.
Right, because both of John's Pokemon are already asleep, Smeargle doesn't really have much else he could do right now. Maybe a Follow Me to redirect something from the Golduck, but he just decides to bring a Groudon here. It's a very safe switch because John's Pokemon are asleep. And
Kangaskhan, this is actually its first turn of sleep because it Sucker Punched earlier and didn't take the sleep after the Dark Void hit. So pretty safe. The Golduck probably not going to be doing a lot of damage and probably focusing on Xerneas more than anything anyways.
Right. Golduck could potentially wake up here. We know it has Encore. So if Golduck gets that first turn wake up and goes for an Encore into the Xerneas,
and it does exactly that, which is really well done.
We do get to see Golduck go for the Encore. That is a lucky but good read by John, knowing that Tom would want to set up his Xerneas in front of 2 sleeping Pokemon. So now Xerneas won't be able to do any more damage while it's being trapped in a Geomancy. However, Groudon is still on the field, and Groudon is still threatening Golduck and Kangaskhan.
Right, so at this point, the Xerneas comes off the field. I imagine Groudon's going to pick up a double KO here, or just go for the Protect.
Right. Interesting choice by Tom. He's just playing it very safe right now. He's because the Golduck is awake, it could go for a Hydro Pump into the Groudon. So he just wants to keep his Groudon safe, get Smeargle in, maybe just try to put the Golduck back to sleep, so that way he doesn't have to worry about a Hydro Pump.
Yep, and so that Protect there was really good for the Groudon since both attacks were targeted into it, and the Smeargle got a speed drop. So I imagine the Kangaskhan is going to be faster than it and could probably KO it before it gets a chance to do anything. But he just goes for the Spiky Shield, wants to keep that safe, maybe get another chance for a Moody boost, as Kangaskhan goes ahead and KOs itself on the Smeargle.
That was a really good play by Tom, identifying how much of a threat Smeargle is, knowing that Spiky Shield would be able to knock out the Kangaskhan because of the contact.
So there's another speed drop for Smeargle. Maybe it's slower than the Golduck now and could be encored into Spiky Shield. But that, of course, assumes that Golduck doesn't get KO'd by Xerneas.
Right, because even though Smeargle's slow after the speed drops, we still know that Xerneas, its speed hasn't been changed. It's still going to be faster than that Golduck. But another thing to note, Smeargle is slower than John's Groudon. So John's Groudon is probably going to be able to get a bunch of damage off with the potentially Precipice Blades, because this Dazzling Gleam is not going to do much because of Groudon being a fire type resisting that fairy move.
Yeah, so we fire off that Precipice Blades, but it's not enough to pick up a KO on either of these two Pokemon. So I imagine we're about to see...
The Precipice Blades brings both the Xerneas and the Smeargle down into the red. However, because Smeargle manages to survive the Precipice Blades, it gets off a Dark Void, and now Groudon is put back to sleep. So we get to see John bring his own Xerneas in now. So Xerneas in a pretty good position because both of Tom's Pokemon are low. A Dazzling Gleam could probably pick up a double knockout here.
Of course, at that point, you're also risking the Wide Guard, which Tom was worried about just seeing a Dazzling Gleam and goes ahead and Wide Guards to try and protect his Pokemon from the Dazzling Gleam KO, which does work out. So it's a very dead turn for John. He burns another sleep turn on Groudon, but gets no damage done.
Right, so now what do you do if you're John here? You know that Smeargle has Wide Guard, so you could go for a Moon Blast to try to avoid the Wide Guard, but if you leave the Smeargle alone, you put your Xerneas at risk of getting put to sleep by another Dark Void if he doesn't go for Wide Guard.
Yeah, I think the safe play here is to go ahead and boost up with Xerneas and just hit the Precipice Blades with Groudon. Groudon should be waking up this turn, because then you get a boost if they Wide Guard, and you get a double KO if they don't. Unfortunately, Groudon still stays asleep, which means that Xerneas is going to sleep in the face of the opposing Groudon.
Right, so it looks like John was afraid of another Wide Guard, and so he just decided to go for the single target Moon Blast to knock out Tom Xerneas. But the result of that is it gets put to sleep by Dark Void because Tom decided that he would rather put Xerneas to sleep than block a Dazzling Gleam.
Yeah, so now both of these Pokemon are probably in range of the opposing Groudon's Precipice Blades, which can be really scary, especially since you may not have a chance to deal damage with your own Groudon first if this Wide Guard blocks like John's Groudon's attack.
Right, so a very safe play for Tom is to just go for the Wide Guard, protect your Groudon from John's Groudon, and just shoot off his Precipice Blades, just doing a bunch of damage, actually picking up a knockout onto the Groudon.
Yeah, so it's a little unfortunate for John that his Groudon took max sleep, but I mean, if you imagine he fired off a Precipice Blades, it wouldn't have even mattered. So Tom playing this excellently, really locking down this game. Right, and so in this situation, we see just from the text box there on the screen that John's going to decide to forfeit this game because he's got a low house sleeping Xerneas. There's not really much he can do to come back from this one. So Tom takes the victory in this game. Yeah, so Tom definitely played really safe there. Once his Xerneas got encored, sometimes the temptation is like, hey, why not go for this second Geo? If I get the encoring Mon off the field, I can get my Xerneas to +6. He decided that wasn't worth it. He switched out some boosted Pokemon. His Smeargle had some excellent boost, but he realized that keeping it on the field wasn't doing him any good, and decided to give those up to get better field position, and it really paid off there at the end.
Right, so something I find interesting about Game 1 is neither player brought their Trick Room Pokemon. Tom brought his Salamence, and John just brought his restricted Pokemon in Kangaskhan. So I wonder if either player is going to try to mix up their game plan for this next game. Either player could potentially bring a Cresselia or a Bronzong, maybe trying to set Trick Room to avoid Smeargle potentially getting a speed boost and ruining your day. Both Cresselia and Bronzong commonly carry a Lumber or a Chesto Berry to be able to set Trick Room in the face of a Smeargle with Dark Void.
Yeah, and like you said, it's interesting that neither player brought their Trick Room mode. I think it's interesting that Tom showed no fear setting Tailwind when he knew his opponent had a Trick Room mode that he could be bringing.
Exactly.
But since they didn't, that really paid off. It paid huge dividends, letting his Smeargle be faster. So if you're John,
So I wonder.
And there we are.
So we see John goes ahead and leads with the monkey lead. And Tom is mixing things up. Instead of bringing his Smeargle this game, he's actually bringing Bronzong. And so just straight from turn 1, Tom could go for a Tailwind or a Trick Room, just depending on whatever speed control he thinks he might need. Or he could also just go for some damage. Double Edge, Hyper Voice, Gyro Ball, all would be really helpful for Tom in this situation.
So John decides, you know what? There's a Bronzong over there. It could Gyro Ball me. I don't even care. I'm going to go ahead and click this Geomancy. And Tom's not scared of the Smeargle putting that Bronzong to sleep. So I imagine we're going to see a Safeguard instead.
Interesting. So that's going to block any more. Oh, wow. Trick Room Smeargle. So I think that John thought that Bronzong would go for the Trick Room, and so John wanted to reset Trick Room with Smeargle's Trick Room, but because Bronzong went for the Safeguard, John just set Trick Room up on the field, and now Smeargle can't even Dark Void because Safeguard will block it. So,
that's a really...
Bronzong being a slow Pokemon with Gyro Ball, it now is threatening John's boosted Xerneas.
That's a really cool play. I really like to see people go for those big plays. I'm sad it didn't work out, but I do think it's excellent. And
so Xerneas now in the Trick Room is afraid of that Bronzong. It's boosted up. It's going to take big damage from Gyro Ball, so it goes for Protect.
So John goes ahead and undoes Trick Room that turn. Do you think he goes for the third one, thinking Tom's going to try and set it again, Protect and Trick Room?
Yeah, I think so. Right now, because Safeguard is up, Smeargle can't put anything to sleep with Dark Void. So there's not really much else it can do except for Crafty Shield or Trick Room right now.
Unless he's rocking the Follow Me, but have we seen all of the Smeargle's moves so far?
We've seen Trick Room, Dark Void, and Crafty Shield. I don't know if we've seen the fourth move.
Alright, so Tom goes ahead and brings back his Smeargle, or his Salamence, not wanting to let it get KO'd for free by this Xerneas. And it's a good thing John didn't try and set Trick Room again, because Tom went straight on the offensive with his Bronzong, and he would have just wound up setting Trick Room for the opponent one more time.
Right, so I'd say Tom's in a pretty good position right now. He doesn't fear the Dark Void because of Safeguard, and he's got 2 Pokemon that resist Fairy on the field. So even though Xerneas has been boosted up, it's not going to be able to do much damage to that Groudon or that Bronzong.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We see both restricted Pokemon on the field protect, while Bronzong finally sets Trick Room. The one time John doesn't Trick Room with Smeargle is when Tom decides to set it up.
Right, so we do get to find out the 4th move on John's Smeargle, which is in fact Wide Guard. He was probably afraid of an incoming Precipice Blades from that Groudon, and so he wanted to block that. But that allows Tom to set up a Trick Room. And so now, because Xerneas has been boosted, Bronzong and Groudon are going to be able to move before the Xerneas.
Yeah. It's really too bad. John was making these big gutsy plays, but you can't make big gutsy plays the entire time. As Bronzong goes for the side swagger, this is going to be incredible, seeing what the Groudon chooses to go for. A Fire Punch into the Smeargle rather than the Xerneas.
Right, because it's a Steel and a Fire Pokemon on the field, the Fairy moves from Xerneas are not going to be doing much damage. So Tom is just trying to do as much damage to the Smeargle as he can.
Trying to get that Smeargle off the field before it can ruin his day, as it unsets the Trick Room. But that Groudon's at +2 and is not going to go down to a Moonblast. So what do you do here if you're John? Because he can't Dark Void. There's still Safeguard on the field. Do you just target down the Bronzong and hope that you crit and it somehow goes down?
if I were in John's situation, I would have gone for the wide guard. But oh, you know what? Safeguard actually ran out, so he goes for the Dark Void here. So Bronzong is going to be put to sleep. Groudon protected itself. So do we get to see a Lumberry here?
Yeah, so Bronzong eats the Lumberry, but it goes for a Safeguard instead of setting up Trick Room. I don't know, is the Groudon in Moonblast range, or is the Bronzong in Dazzling Gleam range? Is John going to at least be able to pick up a KO this turn before his Xerneas goes down?
That's a very good question. I bet a Moonblast would probably knock out the Bronzong. Dazzling Gleam will be close. I don't think a Moonblast. It'd be close on the Groudon as well. So Smeargle is probably going to go for a wide guard here. So if you're Tom, you can really only knock out one Pokemon right now with Fire Punch because Precipice Blades would get blocked by that wide guard.
However, I mean, if he goes for like a Gyro Ball and a Fire Punch, he can pick up the double KO here.
Right, so who does Xerneas Moonblast?
Xerneas Moonblast the Bronzong. He wide guarded, so I guess he's just hoping to catch the Precipice Blades coming in.
Right, and so Groudon, anticipating the wide guard, goes for a Fire Punch, which is going to be enough to knock out the Xerneas, especially after that +2 boost because of the Swagger and the Safeguard.
Yeah, so I love seeing that side Swagger. It's a little bit of a gimmicky strategy, that we kind of look down on, but it gives his Groudon a ton of damage output potential, and it's really going to be paying dividends here, I think.
Right, in this situation, it really works out for Tom because he set the Safeguard to block Dark Void, but Safeguard just also happens to block Confusion, which allows the side Swagger to just boost Groudon up without having to worry about statusing it at all.
Yeah, so John brings in his Golduck. Unfortunately, it's going to be slower than both Pokemon on Tom's side of the field. And there's no Trick Room up.
If Groudon wants to damage the Golduck, it has to go for a Fire Punch, though, because, again, Smeargle can just go for another Wide Guard. So I wonder if a +2 Fire Punch and a Double Edge is going to be enough to knock out the Golduck, especially with that Citrus Berry.
I mean, I like to imagine that it will be, but honestly, I don't know. So,
right, because with Cloud9, Groudon no longer has the Sun boost on its Fire Punch.
And the Salamence goes for a Tailwind, which is interesting, given that this turn would have been a good chance for John to try and set the Trick Room up.
Right, so Tom is just playing it safe. Doesn't want to have Groudon take a Hydro Pump or anything like that. Just protects Groudon, sets the Tailwind up. Now he's guaranteed to go first. And so Smeargle's just going to keep going for that wide guard. Does not want Groudon to shoot off any powerful Precipice Blades. So Salamence going for the Double Edge, wanting to dodge that wide guard. So now we get to find out, will Fire Punch be enough to knock out this Golduck? It is a +2, but it's a resisted hit.
It's a resisted hit, and there's no Sun Boost. And Golduck is able to hold on. Will this Hydro Pump connect? And since it does...
It does. If you
with a
told
critical
me
hit,
when we got the new rules out that a Golduck would be able to survive a +2 Groudon and a Salamence in the same turn, I probably would not have believed you. That is very impressive. That Golduck is able to survive both those hits and knock out the Groudon.
So this Smeargle has been on the field for several turns. It's racked up a lot of boost, but is it really going to be able to do anything with them?
Right, because of that boosted Groudon, Smeargle was forced to just go for the wide guard to block the Precipice Blades.
And I believe
since
now Tom still has Tailwind on his side of the field, as well as Safeguard, I'm not sure that the Smeargle is really going to be able to do anything.
Right, so Tom just goes for a single target Double Edge to knock out the Golduck, and Xerneas is going to go ahead and just set up here. Doesn't have to worry about Wide Guard because of the Double Edge, and because of Safeguard, doesn't have to worry about a Dark Void. So the fact that we don't see Wide Guard, I think Smeargle is going to go for a Trick Room here, which is going to be beneficial for John because that Xerneas just boosted its speed.
Yep, so setting that Trick Room is a really good play. And Safeguard goes down. So as long as Smeargle, is going to have a chance to fire off some Dark Voids now. So even though Smeargle's down to 1 HP and John just has Groudon, he's still not out of this game.
Right. Groudon is going to have a favorable matchup against Tom Xerneas. Salamence normally would have a favorable matchup against Groudon, but if Salamence is sleeping, that doesn't really matter much.
Absolutely. So there's basically no reason for John to click Dark Void here. What's his Groudon going to need? It almost feels like he has to have a Swords Dance or something in order to come back in this game, though. Right,
so Fire Punch or Precipice Blades would do big damage to the Xerneas, but Salamence is going to be immune to Precipice Blades. So if Groudon, you're right, Winnie. I think if Groudon wants to make quick work of the Salamence before it wakes up, it's going to have to go for a boosted Fire Punch, because without a boost, Fire Punch won't really do that much to the Salamence.
Now, it's interesting to see that Protect there. I'm wondering if he lost track of the number of boosts that the Smeargle has gotten and wanted to make sure that he puts these two opposing Pokemon to sleep and was just banking on him doubling into the Groudon there. But that does burn a turn, and we're getting close to the game being over on timer. So
right,
I think John's really got to
just
take as much advantage of these turns as he can.
Right, because the Smeargle's at 1 HP, Tom has the HP advantage here, and so if the game does go to timer, John's going to have to do as much damage as he can to try to just win that tiebreaker.
All right, and so Groudon does reveal the Swords Dance, which means if he can get a... As Smeargle's evasion boost, let it avoid both opposing single target attacks. What do you do here now?
Wow,
do you go for the...
Just so much happened that turn. You got a double wake up, double miss, boost, and now we have a protect. Well, we have a double protect because of an incoming Dark Void and Fire Punch. So there's just so many reads and just random stuff happening right now.
Is this the last turn of Trick Room? It is not the last turn of Trick Room.
All right, so the fact that Trick Room is still up is very good for John, because that means Groudon's going to be able to move first before the Salamence and the Xerneas. So if you're Tom, do you try to go for a double protect here to stall out the Trick Room?
Yeah, he did go for the double protect. Did not get it on the Salamence, so Salamence is going to sleep. But Xerneas is still boosted and is going to be able to do a lot of damage here. However, it is going to be forced to go for a Moonblast rather than a Dazzling Gleam.
Right, so now Xerneas is going to be able to knock out the Smeargle with the Moonblast like you mentioned. Groudon's going to be free then to just do a bunch of damage with a boosted Fire Punch into Xerneas. And then that just leaves Salamence and Groudon. So depending on how soon Salamence wakes up, this game could go either way.
Yeah, so I think in this situation, so John goes for a Wide Guard. I think a Wide Guard or a Dark Void both could have been the right play, given that Tom has to target down the Groudon. So this Fire Punch goes into Xerneas, and it is enough to pick up the one-hit KO. Unfortunately, there's not going to be enough time to bring this game to timer.
And so for Tom, it's just Salamence versus the world.
But
he's really, if he wants to come back in this one, he's going to need Salamence to wake up.
Yeah, that was John's play was to make sure. I mean, not make sure. He just had to play to the Salamence sleeping through that turn. And I think it was a smart play on his part to go ahead and not take the full time there in case the Salamence did wake up and get a protect off. That way he'd have another chance to KO.
Right.
Was it? I don't know. I think he didn't want to take the timer win since he had the out there. And obviously,
right.
I think that was his only out, was getting the extra sleep turn.
Right, and so John picks up the winning game too, and so we get to see another game 3 here in the finals.
Yeah, so this has been a really exciting set as far as Top Cut goes. Every game's gone to a best of 3, and so that really gives these players, all the time they need to really analyze their opponent, analyze their opponent's teams, and figure out how to win.
Right, and so we saw a lot of information there in Game 2. We got to see the Trick Room on John's Smeargle, and so that confirms that both teams have 2 Trick Room setters. And so I wonder how Tom might adjust with his own Bronzong, knowing that John's Smeargle can reset Trick Room.
All right, and so Tom going back to what worked Game 1 with the Salamence Smeargle lead, and John deciding, you know what, let's just go with both of my primals. Why not?
Right, and so the Salamence lead, pretty good for Tom, because Groudon's going to get intimidated, going to be doing less damage as a result. Also, Salamence is going to be able to move first, do damage before Groudon or Xerneas can set up with a Geomancy or a Swords Dance. Not to mention that the Smeargle, always a threat with Dark Void, potentially getting to put Xerneas and Groudon to sleep.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how this turn turns out. And I don't think we've seen if John's Groudon is faster than Tom's Smeargle, which is going to be really important depending on how fast each of those 2 Mons are, how this turn plays out. Because if you can't KO that Smeargle before it sets off a Dark Void, that can spell trouble really quickly.
Right, so we know John has a Trick Room mode on his team, so that's probably a slower Groudon, but we don't know if it's a slow Smeargle or a fast Smeargle. So that could be important here if depending on how John plays that out.
Right, and since Tom does have both a Tailwind and a Trick Room mode, there's really no reason for him to have max speed Smeargle. But he definitely could, and that could really play a lot into this first turn. So John decides to go ahead and just Geomancy in front of that Smeargle.
Right.
Maybe he's hoping that the Dark Void misses. As Fire Punch goes into Smeargle, so Groudon is faster.
Or Groudon knocks it out with his Fire.
It could be, yeah, absolutely. But
okay, so
Smeargle
Tom
connects
gets off
with
the
both
Dark
Pokemon.
Void. Yeah, so Groudon and Xerneas go to sleep. Salamence went for the Protect, probably fearing a potential Moonblast, which would have been able to knock it out. So Salamence, now that the Xerneas is asleep, is safe here to just get off some damage onto the Groudon to the Xerneas. And Smeargle also safe here because Groudon and Xerneas are asleep this turn, and they haven't taken their sleep turns yet.
Since they moved before Dark Void hit, they haven't taken any sleep turns, which means Tom has a completely free turn here, and he hasn't taken very much damage on his side of the field. So I imagine right now he's setting Tailwind with his Salamence and just getting in position with his Groudon.
Right, yeah, switching Smeargle out because both Pokemon are asleep. Not really much else Smeargle can do right now, so it's just better for Tom to get Groudon in here, so it can probably set up a Swords Dance here pretty soon and just start wreaking havoc.
Oh, but he instead of setting the Tailwind, he decides to go ahead and go straight for damage with his Salamence. So now there's a little bit of RNG going on. Is John's Groudon faster than Tom's, and will his Pokemon wake up? If he gets the double turn 1 wake up here, and his Groudon is faster, then he's got a good chance to pick up some KOs. But if he doesn't, then Groudon's in a really commanding position.
Right, so Tom decides to play it safe because if Xerneas were to wake up, Salamence could go down to a boosted move. So he decides to keep Salamence alive.
But Xerneas avoids the Precipice Blades, which is really big. And we did see that John's Groudon moved before Tom's. So now, again, it's going to come down to if Xerneas can wake up this turn.
That's a very important miss for John here, because that Precipice Blade probably could have knocked out the Xerneas, in which case Salamence would have been safe.
I mean, you really got to be you're probably really upset if you're Tom in this situation because, you just took 2 Pokemon down that you probably wouldn't have lost if you got that Xerneas knocked out.
Right, Xerneas does manage to wake up, knock out the Salamence, and then John's Groudon moves first, and so Tom now down both Salamence and Groudon.
Right, so now this game is certainly not over. With a Smeargle Xerneas on the field, there's always a chance to come back because you've got a lot of mind games going on here. If John is like, oh, this is easy, I just click Dazzling Gleam and Precipice Blades, but the Smeargle goes for a Wide Guard and lets him set up his Xerneas, this game is certainly not over. But John doesn't want to risk a Wide Guard, goes for the Moonblast into Smeargle. The opposing
Smeargle going down to the Moonblast.
And Tom's Xerneas gets set up.
Right, it manages to set up its own Geomancy, so we now have 2 boosted Xerneases on the field.
And Groudon, also not wanting to risk that Wide Guard, goes for a Fire Punch at Xerneas, but that's going to be a 3-hit KO. So now, one more time, we've got some speed things going on. So Tom's Xerneas is faster than John's and fires off that Dazzling Gleam, but it's not enough to KO John's own Xerneas. So I imagine we're seeing a Moonblast into that slot. Is it going to be enough to pick up the KO?
The Xerneas is boosted.
The Xerneas holds on with just a sliver of HP.
But the Groudon fainted, so that means we just have 2 boosted Xerneases left. But John still has 1 more Pokemon in the back.
Yeah. What do you do here? Since you know that your Xerneas is slower and we've seen this Focus Sash, do you just go for the Trick Room?
Or you could just go for a Protect on the Xerneas and try to put it to sleep with the Dark Void.
Yeah, I do like that he goes for the Trick Room there instead of the Dark Void. Because had Tom gone for the Protect, we would have been right back to square one. By going for the Trick Room, he just assures that his own Xerneas is going to be faster than that opposing Xerneas.
You're right. Trick Room is the better play, especially because Dark Void still has the chance to miss.
Yep, I think that was a really good play, really recognizing your win condition. And
right, so now in Trick Room, John's Xerneas is going to move first, and it's going to be able to pick up the knockout on the very low health Xerneas on Tom's side of the field. That is Tom's last Pokemon, and so John is going to pick up the victory in today's Premier Challenge. Congratulations to John Masters.
Yeah, well played by John Masters. That's certainly going to be a great start for his 2017 season, and I hope to see him doing well in December when we switch over to the new games.
Right. There's I think only 1 event left, or 2 events left for John on the 2016 rules. There's 1 more Premier Challenge next week, as well as Fort Wayne Regional Championships, which is going to be Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, so he got to play some good players this weekend, showed that he knows what he's doing with his team and that it can work. So I hope he carries that success with him to regionals in Fort Wayne. And, just good luck to everybody on the rest of their season.